You are here with your hostess, Lauren Smith, and tonight we have David Sidoti on. He is from the independent Sasquatch research team out of Florida. We have had David on before quite a few years ago, a number of years ago, and I've been wanting to have him back for some time now. I'm really excited about this show. It's going to be a good one. Be sure to hit the like and follow button on whatever platform you're using to listen to the show. Drop a comment if you like the show. And if you want to have him back on in the future, also just drop a comment, let me know what you think. And if you are in the live chat right now, you can type your question for the guest in all caps, and my moderators will get it to me to ask David for you. So, like I said, be sure to hit that subscribe and follow button, and I'm going to go ahead and bring David on. Hi, David. How are you doing tonight?
Hello. I'm doing well.
Good.
Glad to be on the show. Thank you for inviting me.
Yes, of course. I'm glad to have you back. I know you said the last time we had you on, I was pregnant with my second kid, so it's been a minute.
Yeah, it has.
I know that Lori was doing the show when we had you on, so I hope I can fill those shoes,
Well, absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so I know that I posted your bio. It says all this in there, but for the people that didn't get to read it, what got you interested in this topic?
Oh gosh, when I was young, me and my brother used to run around the woods like crazy as kids. That's what kids did back then.
Yes.
Explore, build forts, all that kind of fun stuff. And I guess I was around 7 years old, and we used to watch a show called In Search Of with Leonard Nimoy. Well, one night we were watching that, and they had Bob Gimlin and Roger Patterson on the show, and they were showing the video of Patty walking across that. And I just distinctly remember as a kid, I was like, man, that would be cool if something like that really did exist out there. As kids, we're running around hoping to see something like that. It's a big fantasy to see one of those things as a kid. And but as we got older, we put it in the back of our minds and kind of forgot about it all. And then as an adult, back in '95, I got into the computer field and started doing a lot of field work with computers and so forth, and getting the start of that. And so one night, for giggles, I put a search out there for Bigfoot Sasquatch, and I found all this information. I was like, okay, that just stoked the fire for me. So in '95, that just, I started reading all these reports from all over the place. And I did that for quite a few years, probably about 2 or 3 years, picking up patterns of these creatures, and things were just starting to click on what these creatures do as far as a species. So as time went on, I was picking up and reading a lot of literature stuff on the subject of field research. So after a while, I decided, I need to get with other people. So I got in with a large group back then that was starting out as well, pretty much. I was with them for about a year. That was the BFRO. And then I got out of that and probably close to the beginning of 2000. And I started up the independent Sasquatch research team. And it was just me. I was the lone guy on the team. But then
I kind of feel like that's the best way to do it sometimes. Honestly,
it is. Yeah, it is. We went from then more people wanted to join. And we had upwards up to I think 20 at one time, and now we're kind of back down to a core bunch of groups of people of 5 to 6 people on our team that are core, researchers that actually get out and in the field. So that was started up in 2000. So for 23 years, it's been, going pretty good. So, and here I am.
Here you are. It's funny. Most people, there's different people that get into this. Most of the researchers that I've talked to, a healthy dose of them, they get into it when they're really young. And it's either I saw Legend of Boggy Creek, I saw In Search Of, or I saw a book in the library. And yours is kind of like 2 out of 3 of those things.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, actually, the Legend of Boggy Creek actually kind of sealed the deal for me because it was
mhm.
later on in life when I saw that one, and I was like, okay, there's got to be something to this, because
Yeah.
this was that thing that movie freaked me out, and I was still kind of young. I was probably 12, and I was like, okay, yeah. So that pretty much freaked me out and got me even more interested in it, and uh, and then when I, in '95 when I did a lot of searching online, it just flooded all that back to me again. Just lit that fire. So um, back in the day when I started out, I said, okay, I got to put all this knowledge to work. So I started camping, and I lived
Mhm.
up in North Florida, and everyone knows, I guess, where Ocala National Forest is. It's pretty much in the center of the state, and it's a fairly big national forest. And I only lived about 30 minutes from there. So I would go camping there almost every weekend, and I would stay in primitive sites as a base camp, and then I would hike what they call the Florida Trail.
Mhm.
It's consists of quite a few miles through the Ocala National Forest, and I would hike those trails at night because I always read that these creatures could be nocturnal, but now that I over the years of more I learned
Yeah.
that you can see these things any time of day.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but at night, I would, have my dinner, get all that stuff out of the way, and during the day, I would do tracking and look for sign during the day, and then at night, I would walk the trail at night with no flashlight, nothing, just pitch black, and just hit the
Yeah.
trail. And
Brave.
yeah, and Ocala's known for quite a few bears, black bears down there. So, um, but for the most part, they they just scurry off from you. They won't attack you
Right.
unless, of course, there's cubs in the area. But I actually got really close to a fawn, about 3 foot from it, and that was pretty exciting. You know,
Yeah.
and but there was a lot of evidence there that we found over the years as time went on. And I moved down further south Florida in 2004 to the Lakeland area, and that's between Tampa and Orlando. So
Mhm.
I'm right in
Thank
between.
you.
So, um, and just north of where I live now is a place called the Green Swamp. I don't know if maybe some of your audience may have heard that. Um, but that is part of the corridor that kind of runs through, and actually north of the Green Swamp is area called Leesburg, and that connects all the way up through the Ocala National Forest. And there's to the west of that is what they call the Gulf Hammocks, which is miles, thousands of miles of just forest right there. Usually that's used for pine forests where they go and harvest pine trees for the paper mills and stuff like that. But lots of forest right there, lots of big corridors for these creatures to move through. And the Green Swamp is pretty close. It's 45, 45 minutes, with traffic trying to get through town.
That's not
But
bad at all.
yeah, once you get through the traffic and you're in the woods, then you're right there. Um, there's been quite a few sightings all through that area right there, and that's one of our main areas that we hit pretty much. And but actually found what I found like a little infant track, what looked to be an infant track.
Mhm.
And uh, the last conference I went to, Jeff Meldrum just happened to be there as well, doing a presentation. So I had my casts out there, and I had him look at it finally because
Yeah.
he was there, and I never shipped it out to him. But I said, hey, what's your thoughts on this? And of course, he kind of looked at it and goes, well, he said it kind of resembles a bear print, and I was like, "Oh man, you just took the wind out of my sails," because it kind of looked like an infant print,
Yeah.
and in that area, it it wasn't really known for black bear down there, but they started getting some coming back, or actually coming into the area, probably about 8 years ago, I think 6 or 8 years ago. Um, So is it possible that it could be a black bear, possibly? Yes, and but it it looks pretty close to what an infant print would look like, in my
Yeah.
opinion. But
It's one of
regardless,
those
yeah,
we'd rather know, even if it's not what we want to hear. We want to know the truth.
exactly,
Yeah,
yeah. So
that's yeah.
that's why we have the experts to look at these things. So,
Mhm.
uh, but tracks can mislead you sometimes,
Mhm.
and that's why it's always good to get bone up on your tracking skills and your
Right.
casting skills and so forth. I always tell my team, I said, when in doubt, just go ahead and cast it. We'll figure
Yeah.
it out later.
Mm.
If it looks
Yeah.
like something, go ahead and get it.
And
Um,
then verify.
verify, verify. Yeah,
If you have a trusted advisor, or I have like a panel of advisors that I
yeah,
send my evidence to, and they're all very skeptical, very analytical, very scientific, and I'm like, okay, this is a possible track, give it to me straight,
yeah,
what is this, and so um because I want to be held accountable in my research, and I want people to know that
right.
I'm not that not everything is Bigfoot, so.
Absolutely. And there's been other prints out there that we found that, very big, large imprints.
Hmm.
Not so much with definitive toes, but something very large left imprints in the ground. Some of the terrain up here is very hard to get a good print. Um, so those you can count yourself lucky to find something with
Hmm.
things you may find in a muddy, a good print somewhere in step something that stepped in the mud and gave great detail. Um, but there's other tree formations that we found all through here. Just north of Tampa, there was a area that a gentleman sent me a picture one day, and he asked me because he had an encounter many years back, um, that crossed over in the road, and him and his buddy saw it. So that kind of got him interested in these things. So he started going out looking in some of these areas that he hunted in and fished in and all this stuff. And he sent me a picture one day. He said, "Dave, what am I looking at?" And he sent me this picture, and I'm looking at it. I'm like, "Holy crap!" Um, it was a cypress tree that was, if you can picture an oak tree, kind of like this, with the
Hmm.
two two branches going straight up. Well, this cypress tree was kind of like in this area, shoved into the ground, and the root ball was hanging up straight up in the air. And he asked me what what this could be, and I said, "Well, I said it looks like a territorial marker that And I said that's probably the first one I've ever seen in Florida like that. I've never seen anything. So I said, let me get a couple of the guys together, and we'll come over there and investigate the area, check it out. And so we got in the area. We had to ride in there with bikes, and and it was pretty interesting because when we first pulled up, we got a whistle, really loud, shrill whistle, um, and as soon as we got to the location, and everybody heard it, I was like, "Yeah, it was coming from the southwestern way."
Hmm.
Um, so we're keeping our eyes and minds on that area just in case we hear another one. So we're investigating the area over there, and as we're taking pictures and measurements and so forth, um, the the cypress tree that was found there. I asked Mike, his name. Um, I said, "Is there any more trees like this in the area?" And he goes, "No, there's not until maybe." He said he thinks about 150 yards,
Hmm.
and he says, "There's no other trees like that here in this area." So kind of looked around, made sure there wasn't, and but we did our measurements there and took lots of pictures and video. And there was a big, huge imprint. It was about 19 inches, and it was like smashed down. And it was the area there had a lot of pine needles and leaves and stuff. So that's kind of the terrain that it was in.
Yeah.
And some of it was kind of swampy. But I pointed down there and on the ground to Mike, and I said, "How long has this been here?" And he goes, "Oh, I didn't even recognize that being there." And so we did our measurements on that. And it was a pretty good indentation there, and there was a like, kind of like a half of that, not too far. It's like a maybe 3 or 4 feet away from it. There was like another step that was probably a partial imprint there. So that was pretty amazing. And he was asking me questions, how, can these things really rip up trees? And I said, well, apparently this one was carried to this location and shoved in here. I said, what usually goes on in this area? He goes, well, they usually do hog hunts, and there's a lot of people who come out here fishing too. And I said, well, the area is very well, as far as the terrain and the brush and the cover, has all that, for these creatures, and also the food source and the water source there. So it has everything that these creatures would love to live in. So I told him, I said, if I were you, I would come out here and maybe put up a few cameras, maybe first put up a couple of audio recorders first. They don't
Mm-hmm.
seem to mind audio records so much as cameras, because
Right.
they're
Yeah.
camera shy a lot. So that was really good. And to me, that was, for seeing something like that, no human could have done that. I mean, it's a pretty hefty tree, unless you have like 5 or 6 guys and want to carry it over and shove it in there like that.
Yeah.
And it was a good 15 to 20 inches in diameter, and um, it looked a little. The tree itself looked a little old, but it all looked like it was freshly done. You know, give or take within 2 weeks.
Right. Yeah.
So he actually said this wasn't here a couple weeks ago.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of those that, because you can chalk a lot up to Mother Nature, right? You can, trees interwoven between each other even can be Mother Nature, but, a tree with a big root ball from
Yeah,
not near there, that's, and that's what I try to tell a lot of people. I'm like, see if the branches in question, if they are even remotely from that area, because that's going to tell you if this is natural or supernatural.
supernatural, right? Yeah, yeah. We had, over the years. Well, in 2010, we had a tracking class for our team, um, and we invited these guys from Georgia to come down. They're all ex-military guys, and so they taught us tracking, because they were into search and rescue.
Hmm.
When they first got out of the military, he started up a group to do search and rescue, and over the years, Bigfoot groups were asking him, well, can you track a Sasquatch? And his answer was, well, if it's got a foot, we can track it. So,
Yeah.
so we hired those guys to come down and give us a class, a good 3.5 day class, I think it was. Um, really good guys, taught us a lot. Um, I actually want to get back with them and do some more continuing education with tracking and some other things too. Um, then we had a forensic class as well. Have a gentleman he was a retired sheriff, from a sheriff department here in Hillsborough County. He dealt in forensics, so he taught us a little bit more on how to collect evidence and how to do it. So that gives us a better edge in the field.
Yeah.
And also, we hired an arborist from University of Florida. He's a really good guy. He came down and did a class. We had him come out into actually one of the areas that we go into in the Green Swamp, and um, he did his presentation of what naturally occurs in the wood, in the forests, especially here in Florida. Um, and so he gave us his class, and we were looking at some of the things, and I was like, okay, that makes sense. This makes sense.
Hmm.
How trees, get damaged just by natural things.
Hmm.
And so we we commenced to showing him some of our evidence that we
Yeah.
found out there, and especially the tree we're just speaking about. And he kind of just scratched his head on that one. He goes, well, you know tornadoes could do something like that, which they probably can.
Yeah. Oh,
So it would be of a more destruction, I would think, in that particular
Mm,
area. I said it just
oh,
wouldn't be just one tree; you would have
right.
several trees doing that. And so he was a lot of the stuff we showed him. Some of the stick formations that we found out there. We actually found two cypress trees in a different part of the green swamp. They were about 3 inches in diameter, and they were close, kind of close to each other, but they went up and they made an arc, and they woved into each other. And
Hmm.
this just happened to be in front of a tree that a hunter was hunting a couple of years before that. He was hunting in front of that on that tree, and he had a Sasquatch encounter crossed in front of him. And um, one of the guys that actually first saw that, or um, tree formation, um, was Rob, um, and he actually asked the guy, because he actually got the report from the hunter,
Yeah.
Rob Robinson. So I asked Rob. I said, "Hey, can you ask the hunter if he remembers seeing this tree structure in front of his hunting stand?" And he did. He said, "No." He goes, "We don't make markings like that. We put tape up, and that's how we
Yeah.
find our hunting stand." He says, "We don't." He goes, that would be too much work." And he just,
Yeah.
so it wasn't him, and he actually doesn't even hunt in that area just because of that encounter he had,
Right.
um, and that spooked him enough to get out of there. But he was hunting in that area for about 30 years and never seen anything such as a Bigfoot, until
Yeah.
that time. So that was a really good, interesting encounter that he had. Scared him, but
Yeah. Yeah, that's the worst when, because I talk to so many people in my personal life that are like, I've been hunting or fishing my whole life. I ain't never seen nothing like that in the woods. And I'm just like, okay, I'm like, but how about the amount of hunters that have? How about the amount of hunters that the woods are their sanctuary and now they can't go back in the woods because they're terrified, or they can't go back in the woods after dark, or, I'm like, it does happen.
it does.
You're
Yeah.
not in the woods looking for that. You're not in the woods aware of that, you know?
And in that particular area, it's a truck route too that runs through there. It's a road called 471, so it's a
Hmm.
truck route. A lot of semis go through there, and I've had one particular driver. He actually lives in Georgia, and his route comes right through here, all the way down to through Tampa. And he got a hold of me, and he said, "Hey," he goes, "just want to let you know that I saw I saw two of these things on my route right through there, and one was like." I was walking off from the side of the edge of the road into the woods,
Hmm.
and one actually crossed in front of them, and on another section, they have what they have. There's a river that cuts through this whole area. It's called the Withlacoochee River, and that thing, it goes like 110 miles. So it runs all through here, through this corridor, and so forth. So they stay close to the rivers and
Yeah.
streams and so forth. But the one he saw that ran in front of him, he said his head was probably about as level with his driver's side window. And he goes, if I was going any faster, he goes, I probably would have hit the thing.
Yeah.
And I said, well, if you ever hit one of these things, give me a call,
Yeah.
because
That's
you know
terrifying though.
that would be the what do you call it, the lottery right there, right? To
Right.
that's what everyone wants a specimen. Unfortunately, we don't like to know that they get killed by something like that. But if
Yeah.
it were to happen, there you go, you have your body. uh,
Yeah. That so many people want.
yeah.
I was going to ask, so, whenever I read what you sent me, whenever you started your team, you kind of had the goal of establishing communication with this species. Can you tell me kind of why? Because most people, they're like, we want to find the scientific data, we want to have experiences. They don't usually jump to communication with the species, and that really intrigued me.
They don't. You'd have to take the approach as like Jane Goodall kind of thing.
Hmm.
But with these, depending on what kind of clan, if you're in an area and you there's a certain clan. I've heard a lot of stories of people that have seen these things all their lives. From being on farmland or what have you, the property that they live, adjacent to. Um, they feed
Mhm.
these things and they get acquainted with them over the years. Um, so it would be kind of, it's kind of far fetched to try to communicate. If you just walk up to one, you would have to really gain their trust. I mean, they would have to trust because, for the most part, they don't trust humans. Um, there's just, there's, from what my opinion is that there's probably just as bad as Sasquatch out there as there are humans. They have, the mentality of just want to kill somebody, or on the opposite spectrum, some of these creatures have been known to help injured people in the forest and get them to safety and that sort of thing. So it all depends on what you're dealing with, what type or what kind you're dealing with, if they're malevolent or benevolent, you know. Um, so, but it would be cool to try to communicate with a species like this, if it is possible, if everything kind of lined up in the stars, so to speak,
Yeah.
to be able to do that.
Mhm.
Because sorry about that, I hit my button there. For the most part, they just want to run away from people.
Yeah.
Um, so I think the gaining their trust, and not for them to not know that you want to cause them harm. You're just as
Mhm.
curious as they are about us. So it's when I started the team, there was a lot of flack back in the day, and not too many people wanted to work with people back then. And I found it kind of a nuisance kind of idea how to go about this, because I was like, if you really want to find answers to things, you really got to have a lot of people on the same page. And a lot of people wanted to hoard their information. Um,
Yeah.
they didn't want other people knowing what was going on here and there. Um, so that's why I created our team, is because we're totally the opposite of what that was back then. It was like,
Mhm.
we want to work with anybody that wants to get in this and help us get closer to the that information. I think from what I see over the years, a lot of that mentality has actually grown to
Mhm. It
do
has.
that. And
Yeah.
I don't want to blow my own horn and say, yeah, I was, spearheaded that, but there was other groups out there that were the same way. And actually, I've talked to other people on other groups across the country that had a lady call me from Michigan because she heard me on a podcast show
Mhm.
and got my information, called me up one day, and
My goodness
she was
gracious.
she was telling me uh, what was going on in her house and on her property, and she was having these things coming through her property like almost daily, almost nightly, and she was wanted me to come up there and check it out. And I was like, well, I wish I could, but finances and I just
Yeah.
can't make that big of a drive to go up there. But I said, uh, and I listened to her stories. She had quite a few stories of what's going on up there, and it kind of sounded like a really good hot spot up there. So I contacted a team up there in Michigan. Spoke to a gentleman there, and I gave him all her information, and I said he had to kind of have an idea who she was because she went to a conference there. And I said, well, if you know who she is, then that's the woman. So and it's her and her husband. They're older couple, and but she ended up calling me because she heard me on a podcast show, which is fine. But that's how we like to communicate with our
Right.
teams. It's like, hey, we got something down here, and I've gotten good with a rapport with Wes Germer from Sasquatch Chronicles, and he actually sent me some information from
Mhm.
people here in Florida. A couple of guys that had some awesome encounters. One in particular happened off the east coast of Florida. That's on all this information that of our what we have of our encounters and reports and stuff are on our website. So if everyone wants to jump on there and have a listen or look at all the pictures on there that we have, I encourage everyone to do that. But There is instead of writing out Steve's encounter, Steve's encounter was pretty long. This is the one that Wes sent me,
Hmm.
and I actually um, instead of writing all that out, Wes already had Steve on his show and talked
Hmm.
about the whole thing in length. And actually, there's two parts. So the second part goes down the rabbit hole. Um, it's a very interesting encounter, and it's probably the most aggressive encounter that I've heard of here in Florida. So if everyone wants to, go check that out, it's on our reports page, and you can check that out. I would suggest listening to both of those two shows back to
Hmm.
back. Um, when I spoke to Steve, um, he had a. I noticed when I was talking to him on the phone for about an hour, a little over an hour or so, he was reliving that whole encounter, and I can tell it in his voice, and I know he wasn't lying to me. And it was just like it happened last night. Is what it sounded like, And the poor guy, he had like PTSD from all this. Um, but it's a very interesting story. I don't want to spoil it if no one's ever heard of it, his report. So I'll just have you guys go over to there on the website, on my website there, and check it
Yeah,
out.
definitely.
It'll definitely make your skin crawl.
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
so
Yeah, I've had a couple of reports like that that just they kind of make you hit your reset on being so gung ho to go out in the woods, and
oh
they give you a healthy measure of respect, for not only for the research but for the witnesses experiencing what they
yeah.
experience.
And I
Um,
do. Someone did have a question about the moon phases. We do pay
yes,
attention to the moon phases
yeah,
out there. Um, it seems to be more of a lot of reports of, especially road crossings. One lady had a road crossing, and she has shook her up, and she never knew that these things really existed, and she did some extensive research, and she's not a quote unquote researcher. She just started looking up information, and she noticed that a lot of roadside sightings happen around like half moon phase. Um, so, and it was pretty interesting that
yeah,
that happens. But we do pay attention to the moon phases. But
hmm,
for the most part of these creatures, if they want to go on the move, it's just like
yeah,
us. Hey, I gotta get up and go to the store. I gotta get over and get some
yeah,
gas. I gotta get up and do something, or
yeah,
go to the grocery store. They're doing the same type of thing. That's
yeah.
the patterns I picked up over the years.
It's a great question from Doug Miller. David, did you follow the moon phases to track Bigfoot? Wild pigs will travel by the moon phases. The week of the full moon, I've always seen the same pigs begin the same location, rooting and eating.
Yep.
That's when I've seen the most activity during the day.
Yep.
Um, yeah.
Yep. They do that. We, during the hotter months, they'll actually move to areas where there's you know, spring-fed areas where they'll get fresh water. So um, during the night and day, they're moving. Um, it's true that their refrigerators move at night too. The pigs and the deer.
Yeah.
So so it's always good to follow those.
Hmm.
We've had this place is full of hogs as well. Um, there's over an abundance of hogs and coyotes and everything out there. So,
Yeah.
and you name it, we've got it. And
Hmm.
anything that creepy crawls and slithers and all that, they have a good source here in Florida. And yeah, so following those and just doing what naturally what hunters do. That's how I learned a lot about how hunters hunt. Is used to work with a gentleman many years ago when I worked on the railroad, and he would he was what you would call a full time hunter.
Yeah.
There was no season for him, so um, but he was funny. But he's I asked him many times. I say, hey, have you ever heard or seen anything out there? Because he goes by himself. He doesn't take
Hmm.
anybody with him. He hog hunts. He deer hunts. Um, So, but he told me a lot about how hunters hunt, and as particularly how he
Hmm.
hunted, and a lot of that has to do with the moon phases and the routines of animals and so forth, different particular times of the year.
Hmm.
So that does help, gives you a good edge on getting out there
Oh
and
yeah,
tracking these and trying to find these creatures, because that every edge helps to get
yeah.
closer to these creatures.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because I feel like if you can track their prey, what they eat, um,
Exactly.
yeah, you might put yourself in close proximity to them as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I was going to ask, so, what you sent me with your info, it says that you have not had a sighting
Have not.
in in
Have not.
28 years of research, and I've been doing this for 20 years and I have not had a sighting either. So I feel your pain. First of
Feel the
all,
pain.
I'm sure you've had, like myself, many crisis of faith where you just wanted to quit and just,
Oh yeah.
I'm
I,
done, I'm done, and then you have that next experience that
oh
keeps you
yeah.
going. But
Yeah. I sometimes yell out in the woods. Will you just show yourself? No.
yes, I do too. I do too. And I'll throw a little I'll throw a little 3-year-old tantrum every now and then. I'm done. Fine then. I don't want to see you anyway. So yeah, definitely. So I thought that was really interesting because very rarely do I encounter someone like myself who's been doing this for so long
But I will.
consistently
Oh
and
yeah.
haven't had a sighting. And so I know that a lot of people though have assured me, so I'm going to assure you now that
Mhm.
it actually it lends credibility to us as researchers that
Oh yeah.
we, rather than fabricate a sighting, we are willingly admitting that we put in the work, but we still
That's
haven't
right.
had the payday. You know.
Exactly. Yeah, we're still waiting for the payday. But I will tell you this: I've besides not having a sighting, I've
Mhm.
been around in
Yes.
areas where
Yeah.
all the action has been around me. I've heard
Same.
the wood knocks, the whistles, the footfalls running through the woods. One of my videos on my YouTube channel is what I call the two-legged elephant, and
Mhm.
uh, and that day I was checking. I was using a GoPro that I just bought, and I was testing it out. The darn thing doesn't have really good sound whatsoever, or audio sound, to pick up. Um, and I was by two ponds, and there were spring-fed ponds,
Mhm.
and I was recording some gators in one of them, and it had green algae in there, and they're all kind of moving around, a couple of them. So I'm recording these gators, and all of a sudden I hear these footfalls behind me on the pond over, and it sounded like a two-legged elephant. It wasn't four
Mhm.
legs. It was just distinctively two footfalls, and it was bam, 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 and I turned around real quick, try to see if it sounded like it was coming at me, but it wasn't. It was running a parallel through the wood line. So I whipped around. I was trying to record at the same time and trying to listen and look,
Yeah.
and I didn't see anything. So I kind of went into the wood line there next to the pond that the noise came from. And again, of course, the terrain is leafy. It's got pine needles, all kinds of all the litter, trash, and all that on the ground. Looking for imprints, looking to find out what the heck this was. Trying to see where it was. I actually broke out my binoculars, looking through the woods, trying to see if I can see any movement whatsoever. But it was nothing. It was like it was gone, like it went disappeared in thin air. And I was like, how can something that heavy? It wasn't a hog, it wasn't a deer, because I know what those sound like. Um, and it definitely wasn't a cow. There's cows in the
Yeah.
area, but um, there was no cows in this particular area. It's actually a water management area, so um, it definitely wasn't that, because cows are clumsy. You can hear and see something like that running through the through the woods. But it was very weird. Now, this area, what I call is Knox Creek, and this is in the Green Swamp. The reason why we call it Knox Creek is every time you're walking through there next to the creek, you'll hear wood knocks. Um, and one particular night, I think it was 2012. I have to go back now. It was me, another gentleman, and a lady, we were hiking that area at night, and the weird thing all three of us ran into that night is in three separate areas, and it was about 50 degrees at night, and we walked through this area on the path that the temperature jumped to like about a good 20 degrees warmer, and then it had like an electrical smell in the air, like something burning, electrical burning smell. And that happened in three separate areas off that trail. And I said, wow, that's weird. I said, that's never happened to me. And it's one of those things you just, take note of and say, okay, that's kind of strange. On the way back, coming back, we actually hit those same three areas again. The same thing. The temperature got warmer, and the electrical smell. And this time, though, I kind of shined around the area a little bit better. And right off the trail, you can see a pine tree, or no, it was an oak tree,
Mm-hmm.
about 34 inches in diameter, and just broke about the 7-foot mark from the ground. I said, that's interesting. So I took note of that. Went to the next site. Pretty much the same thing. It was farther back off the trail, but there was another break about the same distance off the ground.
Hmm.
The very first site that we hit didn't have a tree break at all. There was actually nothing there, but that was pretty weird. It's the rise in temperature, from 50 degrees to say 70 degrees, if
Yeah.
that, maybe 65, somewhere in that. It was definitely, it made us all stop on our tracks, and it's like, you feel that? You smell
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
That kind of
Yeah.
thing. Um, that was probably the strangest thing I've ever
Swamp
experienced.
gas.
It could have been. I don't
Clearly.
know. Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
Trying to find out where that swamp gas was at, but no.
um, I was going to ask, where do you stand on the paranormal? Not necessarily the paranormal aspect of Bigfoot, unless you choose to answer to that, but just the paranormal in general, because as we know, not everything weird in the woods is necessarily Bigfoot. There's other things in the woods besides Bigfoot.
Yeah, there is. Paranormal. Well, Bigfoot is paranormal. I mean, it's out
It
of
is out
our
of the normal. Yeah.
normal. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it falls into that classification. So if I say
Mm-hmm.
no, I'm not into the paranormal, I'm not in the part of the woo and all this stuff. And well, if when I first started, I believed that when I first started, and I said no, these got to be flesh and blood, because everybody else believed it. I got on the same bandwagon as
Yeah.
everybody else. But the more research I did, and the
Mm-hmm.
more reports, now I look at people's eyewitness encounters, and I speak to eyewitnesses, and I've spoken to a lot of them that said that they do these weird things. Now they might not come out first and say something like that to you, but they'll actually say, "Oh yeah, by the way, while it was doing this, I noticed it do that." And I just didn't want to say anything because I don't want you to think I was crazy.
Yes.
But you know, for the most part, we're dealing with energy. Lots of energy. I believe
Yeah.
there's lots of energy around these creatures. So what we don't know about these creatures will baffle you, and if you don't open your mind to even just a little bit to it, you're not really you're you're not really opening yourself up to the questions to be answered.
I
Uh,
agree. You're doing
so,
yourself and the topic a disservice.
well, you are, yeah. I mean, you can be totally against the woo thing, and then one day you walk out there and you see this thing cloak in front of you, or materialize in front of you, and
Yeah.
then what are you going to say?
Yeah.
So so you got to you got to leave your mind open to the fact that we're dealing with energy. We're energy, we're light beings, and
Mm-hmm.
we're so even though we're almost 90% water, you know, but we're electrically charged, so we have electricity going through our bodies too.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, we're you know
Yeah.
a big percentage of us is water. So how do we walk around without electrocuting ourselves?
I mean,
so You scuff your feet against on the carpet, and you
Yeah.
shock somebody, So we're electrically charged. So
Yeah.
um, there's a big possibility these creatures are using quantum physics, maybe, that they could be doing that. Ron Moorhead, speaks a lot
Mm-hmm.
about that in his book.
Yeah.
Got to meet Ron
Yeah.
um at this last conference here in Florida. Actually, I got to meet a lot of people, which Marty and Nikki put on uh, the Great Florida Bigfoot Conference here in
Mm-hmm.
Florida. Thank God for them, because people were asking me, "Hey, why don't you put a conference on?" I was like, "Oh gosh,
Yeah.
I,
It's a
I
lot of work.
it's a lot of work and a lot of money, a lot of time." And that's like,
Yes.
but Martin and Nikki, that's what they do. They put on
Right.
conferences,
Yeah.
and I was like, and I was able to speak at the very first one here in Florida, which was an honor. Um, and hopefully later on I'll hopefully be invited to speak again
Yeah.
at the conference. But I have been on the question and answer board on the second conference and the third conference, and had my booth up and got to meet a lot of great people.
Yeah.
At the
Ron's a great guy.
he is
He's such a nice man, and I've had him on before. I'm actually having him on here again in a few weeks, and so I'm
good.
trying to come up with some really good questions that he's never been asked before. So
That's going
wish
to be
me luck.
hard. Yeah,
Yeah, but
that's a
I
hard
mean,
task.
I
Yeah,
kind of have a track. I think I'm going to go with him
yeah,
because we met him at Beachfoot, and
yeah.
oh my gosh, it was absolutely mortifying. I had just talked to my two sons, and I said they're young, they're 10 and 7, and I said, guys, we don't know everyone here. This isn't a normal camp out, so don't run off, because don't
Right.
run off into anyone's campers or tents or anything. You stay with me. And I turn around and they're gone,
Oh
and I
gosh.
find them jumping on Ron Moorhead's bed as Ron sits there drinking his coffee, laughing, and Ron's wife is making them bacon and pancakes. And I'm
Well,
just,
there
and
you
Ron
go.
was like, he made sure to sit, he sought me out, and he was like, Lauren, your boys are so great. You're doing something right. Don't change a thing. But
Yeah,
I was just like, out of everyone you guys could have went and
yeah.
visited, like, it had to be Ron Moorhead. It was mortifying for me, but he was fine with it. He loved him.
That's
Um,
good. That's good.
so I have probably the most Florida question that I've ever had, from Chris
Okay.
Ramsey.
The Florida man? No, the Florida man.
I mean, it's definitely the most Florida question I've ever
Okay.
asked. He said, David, any anaconda stories with Bigfoot in Florida?
I haven't heard anything yet. Um, Obviously, that fight would be, the anaconda would lose, apparently. Um, but I haven't heard anything yet. Um, I have one of the guys on our team. Him and his wife live in Miami, and he's out there in the swamps down there and doing his thing down there, researching those areas. And he's actually had a couple of good sightings.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I haven't heard anything yet with those. So there's a lot of people that come down for the anaconda, the those sea snakes down there. They're huge, they're massive. I'm glad they're not up here, but they have actually found a couple up in Mayaca area, which is just north of there. So they're kind of like meandering further north, northern
Mm-hmm.
Florida part. But yeah, I haven't heard anything yet with those.
I
But it
feel
would
like
be.
that needs to be
I think
a
that would
good
be a.
sci-fi movie.
I think someone needs to make a good
Yeah.
drawing of something like that. Them two
Yeah.
going at it.
We'll get Jonathan Dodd to
Yeah,
make the poster, and we'll get Seth
there you
Breedlove to
go.
film the documentary.
Yeah,
I think that'd be great. We could have the big brawny um, Ken Gerhard character. He comes
oh yeah,
in with his hat and he cuts open this dead anaconda and finds a Bigfoot body. Solves
that'd
the
be
whole
awesome.
mystery.
There you go.
um,
That'd be awesome.
I mean, I'm not mad at it.
No,
Um,
me.
okay, I have what is my new standard question for everybody that I'm just now starting with you. So you get to be my guinea pig.
Yay! All right.
Yeah. In the field of Sasquatch research, what do you think is holding us back?
Time and money.
It's true. No, it's true. The
It's,
Bigfoot
it is.
curse is that when you become interested in Bigfoot, you will find yourself broke, like
You,
at the
you
same
will.
time.
Yeah. You'll
Yeah.
be looking at your equipment. This damn thing doesn't work, and
Uh-huh.
and
Yeah.
there you go, spend another couple $100 on something else.
Yeah, or thousands. I know people that have
Yeah,
thousands of dollars in equipment, and I'm just like, that's great. I love that they're spending their time and money on
yeah,
furthering this, but that's a lot of money.
it is. It is. I actually met a gentleman many years back. He was good friends with Jeff Meldrum, um, and he his wife had family down here close, not too far from where I live, and we would talk about Bigfoot stuff, of course. And he was one of those and would never go out and look for him. He had he owned a couple of businesses, companies, and one day he wanted to talk with me about what's holding us back. Okay.
Hmm.
And that was one of the questions he asked me while we were talking, while we were having dinner. And he goes, "What's the biggest obstacle that researchers have?" Was that a Sasquatch? No.
No, dude, no. Hey, no.
um,
You don't have to protect us right now. Stop. Okay.
so I told Doug, I said, "Well, the biggest thing is time and money." I said, "We all got jobs we have to go to. We have to,
Hmm.
provide for our families, that sort of thing. Um, and a lot of us are, weekend warrior type of things. So we don't address this like we should or we would like to. It's like spend months on end out there
Yeah.
in the forest with, you know, with unseen
Endless
amount of money.
funding.
Yeah,
The
unseen amount of
dream.
money. Right, the dream to climb. Well, he turned at me and he says, "Well, what if you didn't have to worry about any of that stuff?" I'm like, "Okay, I'm listening." He goes, "How's that going to happen?" And he goes, "Well," he goes, "I got this plan, and I'm going to pitch it to you." He goes, and he was telling me about this, and he kind of had an inkling of why, this mystery wasn't solved. He wanted to solve the mystery. Um, so he told me, he goes, "I'm looking for, groups like yourself across the country to do all the legwork. Bring in the evidence, find the evidence, bring it all in, and bring it to scientists." And I said, "Well, there you go." I said, "Now you have a problem with scientists.
Yeah.
A lot of the scientists that are interested in this are kind of strapped as well, by where they work at, colleges, professors, and so forth. A lot of their colleges aren't going to throw money at something that doesn't, quote unquote, exist."
Hmm.
So he goes, "Well, I got that figured out too." And I'm like, "Well, okay, I'm listening now." I said, "What's this plan?" And he goes, "Well," he goes, "I have a company that I'm wanting to sell, and I'm going to sell it to a foreign company."
Hmm.
And he goes, "I'll have a little bit of money that I could probably throw at this research." And I'm like, "Okay, I'm still listening." And he throws out a number, and I was like, "Okay, wow." And so you have that much you're going to throw out, and it's about like 25 million. And
Good
I
night.
said, "Okay, okay." I said, "You sparked my interest." I said,
If we can't solve it with that, there's no hope.
"Yeah." I said, "So now you just eliminated the time and the money issue,
Hmm.
because now with that out of the way, you can he would pay people to go out in these areas, these hot spot areas, months on end, and stay out there until you get evidence, and then take this evidence." And he was going to have these scientists, a hub of scientists that were also not strapped, um, and let them do their thing, let them do their work. And we would be the ones that did all the legwork. We would bring all the evidence to the scientists, let them do all
Right.
their legwork, and solve the mystery. He had it down. He had an awesome plan.
Yeah.
Um, and in 2021, unfortunately, the beginning of 2020, well, actually the end of 2020, I got COVID,
Hmm.
and I was laid up for a while, a long while. 2021 comes rolling around. Um, I was finally home after 10 days in the hospital from that, trying to get my oxygen levels back up. I
Yeah.
survived apparently. So, um, and the conference was coming up. The very first conference I was supposed to be to. I was like, man, I better not have this COVID when the conference comes around. And so I messaged Doug. I said, Doug, hey, conference is going to be, I think it was in July that year. And I said, hey, you going to come down, because he lived in Kentucky, and it wasn't a big issue for him to, just drive down or what have you. So I sent him a message. I hadn't heard from him. Usually he either calls or he's texting me right back.
Yeah.
Didn't hear nothing. And then I got on his Facebook and I was looking at his post, and I found a post from his daughter.
Oh
And
no.
yeah, and he had passed away. He had developed cancer, and I was like 4 months too late.
Yeah.
I was like,
Oh,
oh man, that stinks.
that's the worst.
Yeah, he had an aggressive cancer, um, and he passed away. And so I was like, oh man, of course I felt bad because me and him were really close,
Mm-hmm.
and we talked quite a lot, probably on a monthly basis. Um,
Right.
and but yeah, it was sad to see him go. But he had an awesome plan,
Yeah.
and it's just sad to see him go. And it's not so much about his plan that you know but he was a great person. He was one of those guys that he'd give his shirt off his back for you.
Mm-hmm.
Just
Yeah.
good all around guy. I'm
Yeah.
gonna get all broke up, but I better stop. So
I know. I know. Well, it is sad to hear that the world lost such an amazing person.
yeah,
And if there's anyone else out there that's amazing like that, with that kind of resource, David is still
yeah,
taking applications for
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
for assistance to solve this mystery.
Absolutely.
Also,
That's
I'm also
yeah.
taking.
Um, but that's what's missing. That's what's missing in this field
Yeah,
is
that's what's
time. It's a lot of time, a lot of effort,
yeah.
and unfortunately, a lot of money has to go into
Yeah.
this. And especially nowadays, things are much
Mhm.
tighter, and
Yeah.
it's getting more difficult to do all the fun things you want to do. So,
It seems
hope,
like everything's going up in price, but
yeah,
things aren't balancing out. If you would have asked me 5, 10 years ago what was holding us back, I would have said the community, the lack of cohesiveness, the lack of sharing. But as you said, that is getting better, and I have seen it
it
more
is.
and more and more. I too became an independent researcher for that reason,
Yeah,
because I research with all these amazing groups that have all these amazing things going on, but they don't want anyone else to know about these amazing things. And so, but yeah, I
share.
think
You got to share the love.
you got to share the love for sure.
Share the love.
But
Yeah.
yeah, so are there any more questions from the chat before I move on to the next thing here?
Doug Miller was asking about handprints, that sort of thing.
Yes.
There
While
was
looking for Bigfoot in the swamp, did you see muddy or wet handprints on the cypress trees?
no, sure didn't. That particular one, like I said, it was probably that tree structure was probably at least 2 weeks old, and
Yeah.
with the in the swamps, things change rapidly as far as
Mm-hmm.
with the temperatures and the rain, the storms, and the hurricanes and all that sort of stuff. But there's every once in a while that we get some good prints, and not particularly from our team, but uh, just people in general. That one was a 19-inch truck that was pulled out of the green swamp there
Mm-hmm.
quite a few years back, probably about 4 or 5 years now. Um, Pretty massive track, and there was actually two, but they only got one good print that had all the toe, well, most of the toes, had four toes. One broke off, and but it was pretty massive. But yeah, there's you mentioned strange stuff in the woods. There's a lot of strange stuff. There's orbs. We've seen orbs. I've seen a UFO. A couple of the guys seen UFOs out here.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty wild. So
Have
we
you
heard
ever
that.
had any UFO activity while having Bigfoot activity or suspected Bigfoot activity? And same for orbs.
Um, Not so much. Haven't heard anything hand in hand with that. Um, Now, one of the ladies that was on our team, unfortunately, she passed away. She had cancer as well. Um, she was half Cherokee, and she was very in tune with nature. She used to hear wolves barking, and
Mm-hmm.
they would be like, right there,
Yeah.
but she would not hear it. I mean, you would not see it, but she would hear like wolves barking. She goes, "That's a wolf. That's not a coyote. That's a wolf." And her and her boyfriend would see orbs and stuff flying around constantly in these areas. Um, but with Bigfoot, we haven't seen any relationship yet with those, but a lot of orb activity. Um, Actually, the UFO that we saw in the Green Swamp, the buddy Bill in Miami actually saw one down that way as well. He said the same ordeal, different color lights just hovering and just sitting there. Um, but yeah, they're ramping down there. They got good. If we're lucky, we'll get some good prints. You got to decipher the gator prints from the Sasquatch.
Yeah.
There's a lot of gators down here that like to mess up a lot of stuff and make you,
Get get
get us on a wild goose chase kind of sort of.
yeah.
You're like,
Actually,
man, that's a gator. That's right. Yeah.
so in my spare time, I watch Gator Boys. I know
Yeah.
it's just who I am. It's my guilty pleasure. I really enjoy that show. But they had a gator with an 8-toed print, and me as a Bigfoot researcher, I'm like, oh, it just stepped in its own track. I'm like, that's all that is, And then no, they found the gator and it had 8 toes, and I was like, oh. Well, but as a Bigfoot researcher, I'm so skeptical of everything,
That's pretty odd. So there might have been some inbreeding or something. I don't know. That's
it was
weird.
a weird
Or
one.
just a deformity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Alan Lassiter had a great question. He wanted to know, have you spoke with any of the Native American tribes in the areas that you research?
Um, I I tried to in Miami, or not Miami, but we're talking about the Everglades. The Miccosukee Indians down there, they know they're out there. They don't. They're very tight-lipped. You're very seldom that you'll find somebody that will, you know, talk to us about that, or anybody, any
Mm-hmm.
of the, white men or what have you. But I think some of that generation is getting more Americanized.
Mm-hmm.
They're hearing the stories, and then they may leak some information. Um, but for the most part, from what I've understand, is that they know they're out there. They just don't want people messing with them because
Yeah.
they think they're a people or a tribe, which I believe, they could be a people, some sort of
Yeah.
a type of human, um, hybrid.
Wild man.
Yeah, wild man.
Yeah.
And the misconception, I don't know how many people on listening to the show tonight are from Florida or not from Florida, but the big misconception that I found here in Florida is a lot of people said, well, the skunk ape, horrible name, by the way, they don't get any bigger than 6 to 7 feet tall. And on the most part of sightings that on average, they're probably about 7 feet that you hear. But ever so often we'll hear people's encounters of, no, this thing was every bit of 9 or 10 feet tall. Especially the tracks that we're finding, anything that's 18, 19 inches long, a print like that, they have to be at least 8.5 feet, 9 feet tall for
Mm-hmm.
a print that big. So there's some big ones down here. There's lots of areas for these things to live in here in Florida. People only think Florida's the beaches and the city life and all that. And I said, well,
Yeah.
everything in between is just woods, buddy.
Yeah. Yeah. I picture Florida as like beaches and swamp, but I know y'all actually do have trees, there. So
even my home state. Um, I was born in Connecticut, but my parents moved down when I was 2.
Hmm.
So I know nothing but Florida and a little bit of North Carolina because I lived up there for a while. Um, but even Connecticut, there's been some sightings up there, believe it or not. So, and
There's
it's pretty awesome to hear
Yeah, it's
that. So,
amazing. It's amazing the places. I think the only out of because I've done over 300 interviews with researchers.
mm,
And the only state that I don't have, I believe, is Hawaii and oh, there's one more, but Hawaii and one other state is like the only state I don't have with a sighting.
yeah,
With a researcher that we've interviewed. So I mean, they're everywhere. They're what I tell people is they're not Santa Claus. It's not one person, one Bigfoot that just pops up in
yeah,
Florida and then goes over to the
yeah.
Patterson-Gimlin area. I was like, this is a species that travels.
When I
So
was, when I was talking to Dr. Maria Mayer, um,
yeah.
when she was at the conference, I was telling her the stuff that's going on in here in Florida because she's from Miami, um, and she said, I'd like to maybe one day get together with you and again go into the Green Swamp, check this area out. And I said, well,
Hmm.
you're more than welcome to. Let's set it up in the future sometime. Of course, she's always busy, with
Hmm.
the expedition Bigfoot and all that.
Yeah.
Um, and actually got to speak to Ronnie LeBlanc, and of course I know Russell from 2018. I went to the conference up there, the International Bigfoot Conference, where I met Russell, and that was an awesome conference. I got to actually meet Adam Davies there, and
Adam's great.
he heard about Steve's
He's great.
encounter down here, and he goes, "Hey Dave," he goes, "I like to come," in his British accent, and he, "I like to come down to Florida and go out to that location that Steve had his encounter." And I was like, "Yeah," I said, "Yeah, you're more than welcome to. Come on down.
Yeah.
I'll definitely get you out there." So we did that, and we went out
Yeah.
to a couple other areas too here in Florida with Adam. And he's at that time he's never been in Florida. He was in Florida for a short bit, but he never did any research in Florida. I think
Yeah.
he was visiting somebody, but then when he got with us, it was the very first time he got out and saw the terrain, and he was very impressed with it. And he loves
Yeah.
it. So now he's living in East Tennessee. So
Yeah.
hopefully it's not too farther. He was in L.A.
Yeah.
I told him, I said, now you're closer. I said, you can, we need to get together and do something.
I mean, that's a day drive. That's fine.
Yeah,
It's fine. No,
that's a good
Adam's a
day
great
drive.
guy.
Yeah,
Yeah, he's a really nice guy, very knowledgeable. I really like him.
yeah. He's fun to be with too when he's out when
Yeah.
camping.
So one last question. What do you have coming up? Goals, plans, conferences, books, team
Um,
endeavors?
I haven't done any books. Gosh, and I think back. Well, people ask me before in the past, have you wrote a book? Have you wrote a book? I'm like, I don't know what to write about. I mean, everyone else is writing books, and I don't want to be redundant on the same topics of things. Um, I, and plus, it would take a lot of time for me to sit down and do that.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm thinking, and the way I look at things is, okay, do I sit down and write a book, or do I get out there in the field and continue on doing the research? Um, I think of the latter. I want to plan to do that in the future, and there's a couple things I want to try to do, and I want to do some solo uh, stuff, and it's kind of a mixture of solo and survival, and get out in areas where I can possibly take a couple weeks and just stay in one area, and I'll get a hotspot area, um, and try to live off the land and do that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, and of course with a couple, equipment. Think of Naked and Afraid. No,
Yeah.
just
I love
no. I
that
won't
show.
be. I won't be naked. I won't be scaring the Sasquatch away. But the something kind of like that. That would be something I may have in the future for myself to do
Yeah,
something solo like that, because you have many different experiences with either by yourself or with one other person
I
or with
agree.
two other persons.
Yeah.
Um, So if you're out there by yourself, there's more of a chance that you may run across these things, or these things might come to you. They might try to figure out, hey, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
Um, so I think that's one of my goals. I was going to try to do something solo and see how long I can last out there, and do that.
I last until the food runs out. That's it. That's me. That's my point. I've tried in my early 20s. I did bushcrafting and did the primitive survival, and
Yep.
now when I go out, I'm Larry Porch. I go out with food, and when the food runs out, all right, it's time to go home and get some more food.
Yeah.
So, but thank you so much for coming on tonight, David. You've been
Oh, thank you.
amazing, even better than the last time we had you on.
Oh yeah, it's fun. I love it, and thank you for having me back again.
Absolutely.
And we'll have to do it again. But if
Absolutely.
anyone has any questions later on, they can always hit me up on my channels there. I've got Facebook, my email, and all that stuff. You can hit me up on that. I'm not hard to find. So.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much again for coming on. Good luck with
Thank you, Laura.
with all of your team and your goals, because I know you guys have good things going on, and I hope to see big things out of you, and I hope to hear about your solo expedition.
Yes, thank you. I'll let everyone know. I'll probably post something on Facebook. And
if you find Bigfoot, you better come back with DNA. That's all I got to say. There's no pressure, but
not my DNA, but their DNA. Yeah.
Right, exactly. We don't want that.
Exactly.
Thank you so much, David. You have a great night.
You're very welcome. Thank you. You too.
All right,
Bye-bye.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for being here tonight and supporting our guest. Thank you for all the comments and questions. If I didn't get to your question, like he said, you can email him. You can contact him on Facebook, Instagram, go through their website and get those questions to him. Again, great questions, great comments. Thank you so much for being here and supporting us. Be sure to subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, and like and follow on Facebook. If you are listening on a podcast platform, subscribe, like, follow, drop a comment if you liked the show. Also, disclaimer, if you hear weird noises tonight, it was my dog Gizmo. He is an elderly doggo, and he snores like a Bigfoot with asthma. I don't know how else to describe it. We recently said goodbye to my other Sasquatching dog, JD, this week. And so I am spoiling my babies and letting them be in here while I record. So you guys are just going to have to deal with the very weird noises coming from under my desk. Again, thank you guys for being here this week. Remember, if you are just missing Night Callers a whole lot, every Wednesday that I don't have a live show, I'm having an archive show on the YouTube channel. And those are shows from when we were before YouTube on Blog Talk Radio, when we were a live call-in show. So you guys be sure to go check those out, get caught up. And if you have someone that you want to see on the show, drop a message in the comments. All right. Thank you guys.